Everyone talks about staying safe when living alone after 60, but what about staying seen? It's a quiet truth no one likes to admit. You can have the lights on, the bills paid, and still feel invisible. Loneliness isn't always loud. Sometimes, it just sounds like silence after breakfast or a phone that doesn't ring as often as it used to. But here's something most people don't know. Researchers now say loneliness can affect your health as much as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Yet, there's a growing movement among older adults proving that solitude doesn't have to be a sentence, it can be a season of rediscovery. Today, more seniors than ever are rewriting the story of what it means to live alone. They're finding ways to replace isolation with independence and quiet with connection, all through simple daily habits that anyone can start, no matter where they live. In this video, we'll explore 7 powerful ways real seniors across America are turning solitude into strength, connection, and joy. Because growing older doesn't mean fading into the background, it means learning to shine again, in your own space, on your own terms. Stay till the end. The last secret might completely change how you see living alone. Meet Lillian Graves, a 71-year-old retired librarian from Portland, Oregon. Sharp-minded and steady-handed, she still alphabetizes her spice rack and keeps a pen clipped to her cardigan just in case. Her curly white hair frames a face that carries both warmth and quiet wisdom, and behind her round reading glasses is someone who has spent a lifetime surrounded by stories. Yet lately, she's been living in one that feels too quiet. 3 years ago, when her husband passed, Lillian's world didn't collapse, it simply went still. Her children urged her to move closer, her friends suggested senior communities. But Lillian wasn't ready to trade the house filled with memories for a place that didn't know her laughter. She wanted to prove that staying alone didn't have to mean being alone. So, she stayed. But she didn't stay the same. She began making small, deliberate changes. Joining a virtual book club, leaving her porch light on for neighborhood chats, even starting a tea at 2 ritual for anyone who wanted company. Slowly, the silence began to shift. Lillian's quiet transformation is a lesson every senior can take to heart, that loneliness isn't defeated in one grand gesture, but in the gentle, daily decision to reach for life again. Secret number 1. Rediscover the sound of daily connection. For Lillian Graves, the silence of her house was the hardest part. Not the empty chair at the breakfast table or the quiet nights, but the absence of everyday voices. No casual good morning. No hum of small talk. Just the low tick of the clock and the shuffle of her own slippers. One afternoon, after realizing she hadn't spoken out loud in almost 2 days, she decided something had to change. That's when she stumbled across something called voice circles, small online audio chats designed specifically for older adults. Using platforms like Get Set Up, AARP Connects, and Senior Planet Community, she began logging in each morning. No video, no pressure, just voices. Some shared stories about their gardens, others about old songs, recipes, or favorite TV shows from the 60s. What started as background noise soon became a lifeline. Experts in 2025 are confirming what Lillian discovered firsthand. Regular voice interaction boosts emotional stability, reduces loneliness-related stress, and slows cognitive decline. According to the American Psychological Association, simply hearing familiar voices daily activates areas of the brain linked to belonging and safety, the same emotional centers that strengthen overall well-being. Lillian noticed subtle changes. Her mornings felt lighter, her laughter more frequent. Even her doctor mentioned that her blood pressure was improving. What surprised her most wasn't the conversations themselves, but how her own voice began to sound different, stronger, more certain, alive again. She began to understand something powerful. Human connection doesn't always require company. Sometimes, it only requires conversation. You don't have to fill a room to feel present. You just need to fill a moment with sound that matters. So now, every morning as she makes her tea, Lillian joins her favorite group of voice friends. They've never met in person, but they know when one of them misses a call or sounds tired. It's proof that connection can travel through airwaves just as deeply as it can across a dinner table. You don't need to be surrounded by people, just connected to a few voices that remind you you're not alone. When was the last time you heard a voice that lifted your spirits? Maybe today's the day to make that call. Secret number 2. Turn your home into a conversation starter. For months, Lillian Graves, 71, a retired librarian from Portland, Oregon, lived in a home that felt like a sealed archive, tidy, quiet, and invisible to the world outside. Her porch had become just another place to pass through, not to linger. But one spring morning, as she sorted through an old showbox of postcards collected over decades of travel, from Rome, Kyoto, and New Orleans, an idea struck her. What if these memories could speak for me? So she transformed her front porch into what she lovingly called her mini memory gallery. Each postcard was pinned neatly along a string of twine, stories of cities, colors, and people she once met. At first, it was just a personal project. But soon, something unexpected began to happen. A neighbor walking her dog stopped one afternoon. "You've been to Paris?" she asked, pointing to a faded card of the Eiffel Tower. Another day, a young man delivering groceries smiled at a postcard from New York. "My grandmother grew up there," he said. These tiny moments grew into full conversations. The porch that once stood silent became a magnet for connection, a space that gently invited others in. Experts in environmental psychology call this social signaling decor. It's the art of using personal spaces to tell silent stories, to display small visual cues that invite dialogue. Studies from the University of Michigan in 2025 show that seniors who personalize their front-facing spaces with storytelling items, like postcards, plants, or art pieces, report 38% more casual social interactions per week than those who don't. It's not decoration, it's communication. Lillian realized that her home didn't need to be big or busy to feel alive. It just needed to say something about who she was now, not just who she used to be. So she added a small chalkboard sign by her door where she'd write a weekly quote or a fun fact about one of her travels. People began stopping by to read it, leave notes, or simply smile. The loneliness that once lingered like a shadow started fading, replaced by light conversations and laughter. Her house began to speak again, not with words, but with warmth. It reminded her that connection often starts not with a knock on the door, but with an invitation to curiosity. Your home can be quiet, but it should still speak for you. If someone walked by your home today, what would they learn about you? Maybe it's time to let your walls tell your story. Secret number 3. Purpose beats presence. For Lillian Graves, loneliness wasn't about being unseen, it was about being unused. After decades of organizing stories for others, her days had grown silent. The phone didn't ring much. The world outside her window seemed to hum without her. One afternoon, while browsing an article on senior engagement, she came across a volunteer app that connected readers with visually impaired older adults who missed the joy of books. Something inside her stirred, a familiar spark of meaning. She signed up the same evening. The first story she read was "And of Green Gables." As her voice filled the recording booth she had created from her quiet study, she felt something awaken, a sense of purpose she hadn't realized she'd been starving for. Each week, she read for a small group of blind seniors scattered across the country, people she'd never meet, but who eagerly waited for her next chapter. "You make the characters sound alive again," one listener wrote in a thank you message. For Lillian, that line was everything. She wasn't just reading, she was connecting. Researchers from Stanford Center for Longevity confirmed in 2025 that seniors who volunteer weekly or engage in purpose-driven hobbies experience up to 50% lower loneliness and depressive symptoms than those who don't. Purpose, it turns out, acts like emotional oxygen. It keeps the spirit alive, even when the house feels empty. Lillian noticed her mood lift in small but steady ways. The mornings that once stretched endlessly now had structure. Her tea breaks became moments to plan which story she'd record next. Even her voice felt stronger, confident, expressive, and alive with intention. She realized that fulfillment doesn't always come from the people around you. Sometimes it comes from the impact you leave behind. It's not about the size of your circle, but the depth of your giving. For Lillian, purpose replaced presence, and in doing so, erased loneliness. She later said, "It's funny, when I stopped waiting for company, I found connection in the most unexpected way. Someone out there was listening. And that was enough." So if your days have begun to feel too quiet, maybe the answer isn't adding more noise, it's adding more meaning. The heart doesn't crave company, it craves usefulness. You stop feeling lonely the moment someone needs what you have to give. What's one skill, story, or kindness you could share this week, even with a stranger? Secret number 4. Redefine friendship for this chapter of life. After her husband passed, and her social circle began to shrink, she realized something quietly heartbreaking. Most of her friendships were built around the past. Old colleagues, long-distance family, neighbors who'd moved away. She still loved them, but the connection felt frozen in time. The conversations revolved around what used to be, not what could be. That's when she stumbled upon something new, a growing 2025 movement among seniors called shared hobby circles. Unlike traditional support groups, these weren't about loss or aging, they were about joy. The circles connected older adults across the US through virtual sessions built around common interests: gardening, watercolor painting, poetry reading, or even trivia nights. No pressure, no pity, just laughter and shared curiosity. Lillian joined a Tuesday evening herb lovers circle. The first time she logged on, she saw faces from all over: a man from Arizona showing off his basil plants, a widow in Vermont holding up lavender from her porch, and someone her own age who joked that her rosemary had an attitude. By the end of that hour, Lillian was laughing, really laughing, for the first time in months. What surprised her most wasn't how much she learned about plants, but how easily she connected with strangers who understood her stage of life. These weren't people who remembered who she was, they cared about who she is now. That small but powerful shift made all the difference. Experts at the University of Michigan's Institute for Social Research have found that activity-based friendships increase emotional resilience by 40% in older adults, because they foster present-tense joy rather than nostalgic dependence. When friendships revolve around creativity and shared goals, they feel lighter, freer, and more sustainable. Lillian's weekly hobby circle became her anchor. She didn't need to dress up or leave home, she just needed her laptop, her herbs, and an open heart. Slowly, her idea of friendship transformed. It was no longer about proximity or history. It was about energy. She put it perfectly one evening: when I stopped waiting for people to show up from my past, I finally met the ones meant for my present. Friendship after 60 doesn't have to look like it used to. It just needs to feel alive. Whether it's a virtual class, a community project, or a shared hobby, connection can evolve beautifully when you give it new soil to grow in. Don't be afraid to plant new roots, even if it's in unfamiliar ground. The friendships you build now might be the ones that help you bloom again. Takeaway: friendship after 60 isn't about who you've known longest, it's about who lifts your spirit now. Mini prompt: what's one small activity you'd love to share with someone new this week? Secret number 5. Let technology serve, not replace, emotion. By her early 70s, Lillian Graves, the retired librarian from Portland with her trademark white curls and round reading glasses, had always been a little wary of technology. She used to joke that apps are for apples, not for people my age. But when she began living alone, she realized something. It wasn't the technology itself that was the problem, it was how people used it. Instead of scrolling endlessly through posts that made her feel more distant, Lillian decided to turn technology into a tool for real connection. Every Sunday morning, she had what she called her digital coffee. She'd brew a pot of tea, prop her tablet on the counter, and video chat with her niece in Chicago or her old friend from the library in Seattle. Sometimes they'd talk for 20 minutes, sometimes for an hour, but it always left her heart feeling full. Then she discovered a new trend among older adults in 2025: voice postcards. Short 30-second voice messages sent through apps like Marco Polo or WhatsApp, designed to keep communication personal and warm. Lillian began sending them weekly: a little greeting, a funny quote, or a snippet of her day. It was simple, but it kept her tone, laughter, and affection alive in the lives of others. It reminded her, and them, that she was still part of their world. Experts from Stanford Center for Longevity now emphasize that technology, when used intentionally, can reduce social isolation by 45% among seniors. The key word is intentionally. That means using digital tools as bridges to human emotion, not substitutes for it. Lillian made it a rule: no endless scrolling, no comparing lives, no mindless screen time. Everything had a purpose, whether that was scheduling a lunch, sending a check-in message, or joining her weekly virtual herb circle. Her phone stopped being a distraction and became her connection lifeline. She even set up her smart speaker to remind her to text 3 people a day, not because she was lonely, but because she understood how much small moments of contact mattered. Over time, she noticed her days felt less empty. She wasn't chasing connection. She was creating it. Her laughter echoed through her quiet home, carried across Wi-Fi, touching hearts miles away. The lesson is clear. Technology isn't the enemy of genuine connection. Used with care, it's one of the most powerful tools for seniors to stay emotionally engaged and mentally strong. The goal isn't to escape into screens, it's to use them to reconnect with life. Because at the end of the day, a voice message, a shared photo, or a live chat can do more than fill silence. It can bring the warmth of real companionship back into the room. Technology is a bridge, not a destination. Use it to cross into real moments. What's one small way you could use technology to feel closer to someone today? Secret number 6. Make solitude sacred, not scary. By the time evening arrived, Lillian Graves had a ritual that few people knew about. She called it her quiet appointment. No TV. No phone. No background noise. Just 10 minutes of stillness, every night before bed. At first, it felt strange. The silence seemed too loud, the clock ticks too sharp. But as the weeks passed, something began to shift. That quiet wasn't empty anymore. It became alive. It was the sound of her mind exhaling. The echo of her own company becoming enough. Neuroscientists in 2025 now refer to this as positive solitude. It's the act of intentionally spending time alone, not out of loneliness, but as a form of mental nourishment. Recent studies from Harvard's Mind-Body Institute show that seniors who practice short daily solitude sessions experience 32% lower cortisol levels, a biological sign of stress relief and greater emotional stability throughout the week. Lillian noticed the change too. Her thoughts slowed down. Her worries about what's next stopped rushing at her the moment she woke up. The world outside her window, the hum of distant cars, the rustle of trees, began to sound less like reminders of who wasn't there and more like companions in her peace. She would sometimes sip tea during these moments or sit by the window with her hands wrapped around her favorite mug, watching the sky fade from gold to lavender. No scrolling. No multitasking. Just presence. Just breath. And in that simple quiet, she discovered something profound. The difference between being alone and feeling lonely. For Lillian, solitude became her sanctuary, the place where she recharged her confidence and remembered who she was when no one else was around. She used that space to reflect, to pray, to list things she was grateful for. It wasn't about isolation, it was about integration, learning to live peacefully with her own company. Experts say one of the greatest predictors of emotional well-being in seniors isn't social activity alone, but the ability to find meaning in solitude. When you make quiet moments sacred, they stop feeling like gaps in your day and start becoming gifts, time to think, feel, and simply be. Lillian once wrote in her journal, "Peace grows in the same soil where loneliness once did, you just have to water it differently." And that's the truth of aging gracefully. Solitude doesn't have to be something you fear. It can be the softest, strongest part of your life. Because once you make peace with your own presence, you stop needing the world to fill the silence, and start realizing how powerful that silence can be. Peace grows in the same soil where loneliness once did, you just have to water it differently. How do you spend your quiet moments, and what do they teach you about yourself? Secret number 7. Build your circle of 3. Lillian Graves discovered one of the most powerful ways to combat loneliness wasn't in large social networks or endless virtual calls. It was in intentionally small, reliable connections. She called it her circle of 3. Her circle included one family member, one close friend, and one neighbor. Every week, she would reach out to each of them, a short phone call, a quick video chat, or a casual doorstep hello. It wasn't about filling hours or forcing deep conversations. It was about consistency. Knowing that at least 3 people genuinely cared, and that she had a space to share small joys or concerns, transformed her daily experience. Research in 2025 confirms the power of this approach. Studies from the National Institute on Aging show that adults over 65 who maintain 3 consistent social bonds experience significantly lower levels of loneliness and anxiety, improved sleep quality, and higher overall life satisfaction. It's not about quantity, it's about quality and predictability. One meaningful connection can stabilize your emotional health, but 3 consistent connections create a safety net strong enough to withstand the unpredictable waves of life. For Lillian, the circle didn't just prevent loneliness, it became her emotional compass. When she felt isolated, she would pick up her phone, knowing there was someone waiting to listen or share a laugh. When she experienced small triumphs, she had people to celebrate them with. Even mundane moments, a neighbor checking in to ask if she needed milk, a niece calling just to say "I'm thinking of you," or a friend sending a photo of a grandchild, all added layers of reassurance and belonging. This practice also encouraged reciprocal care. Lillian wasn't just receiving support, she was actively participating in the lives of her circle members. She shared book recommendations, sent small thoughtful notes, or offered to run errands. This two-way engagement strengthened her sense of purpose and reminded her that independence and connection aren't mutually exclusive, they complement each other beautifully. Lillian's circle of 3 illustrates a vital truth for seniors living alone. You don't need dozens of acquaintances. You need a small, dependable network that checks in, celebrates you, and anchors your emotional life. Small gestures repeated consistently outweigh grand gestures done sporadically. It's not the size of your circle, it's the depth of care that counts. Takeaway: you don't need dozens of people. You need 3 who truly check in. Who would be in your circle of 3, and how could you start connecting with them this week? Lillian Graves didn't simply escape loneliness, she redefined it. Over months of experimenting with her routines, reaching out intentionally, and creating meaningful small habits, she discovered that living alone doesn't mean being alone. It means having the freedom, space, and tools to shape your emotional world on your own terms. Her days transformed from quiet emptiness to ones filled with gentle rhythms. Morning check-ins with her circle of 3, evening reflections that nurtured her inner calm, and small acts of giving that reminded her she was seen and valued. Each step reinforced that connection is not just external. It can be deliberately cultivated even within the walls of your own home. Lillian's home no longer echoed with silence, it resonated with laughter, shared voices, and the comforting certainty that someone would always listen. The biggest lesson she discovered is that loneliness isn't a sentence, it's a signal. A signal pointing toward intentional connection, curiosity, and purpose. When you respond to it thoughtfully, it becomes light, not shadow, growth, not limitation. If this story gave you hope, tap like, it helps another senior find connection tonight. And subscribe to Elderly Dose for more stories that remind you. Growing older doesn't mean growing apart. Every senior deserves to live independently, but not isolated. To thrive, not just survive, and to shape a life rich in connection, purpose, and quiet joy.